Hello. In this lesson, we'll start building the curves that are going to make up our three-dimensional mouse. So we have our three views imported into the Rhino workspace, but we do want to do just a little bit of editing to the picture framed images before we start working. As I mentioned, I can select each one of these images individually. I can click these picture frames individually, and Rhino will give me a little bit of information about them. If you don't have the property windows displayed, just click this icon here on your toolbar and it'll pop up. With the item highlighted, I can see what layer it's currently on and that the display color is set to be by layer, and that is by default. If I click on this icon here under Material, I do get some kind of interesting options. Let me just drag this window just a little bit larger so you can read some of these a bit easier. So you can see I have transparency, reflectivity, color, and some other options. If I take this side view, for instance, and I drag this slider for transparency, you can see now that the image is becoming more and more transparent. And I can do that for all of these. And just drag that transparent icon. And that can be kind of nice while you're working. It allows you to see what's actually going on with your model while you still have these objects up. So there's a couple more things I do want to do with the picture frames before I start working. The first is I'm going to move them onto their own layer. So I'm going to drag with my mouse and I'm going to start in the lower right corner and drag up. And that selects everything it just touches. And I'll come over here to my Layers tab. And again, if you don't have layers selected, just like Properties, we can come up to the toolbar menu and select them. This is Properties and this is Layers. So if either one of those aren't available or aren't showing on your version of Rhino, just go ahead and click here or here, and that'll switch either the Layers or Properties menu on. So I have my objects selected, and I know they're on the default layer at the moment. So I'm just come up to Layer 1, right-click it, and select Change Object Layer. As soon as I do this, when I deselect them, you'll see the outline around them is changed to red, which is the color of this layer. I just want to change the name of the layer to reflect the item that's on that layer. So I'll just click there, and I'll type 2D images and hit enter. Now I can either take these objects and I can do a Control L, which is lock, or I can actually just lock this layer here. And by locking the layer, they're not selectable. I can still switch them on and off nice and easily. And I can just hit that padlock icon to unlock them if I need them. Now note that if I go to draw a line, even though these objects are locked, I can still snap to them. And that's nice and handy, and to make sure they're not in the way, as I said, I can switch them on and off as I don't need them. As you get further in your project, you'll find you need these images less and less once you have all your curves built. All right, let's go ahead and save the file now. So I'll just click Save, and I'm just going to save this out of my desktop. And I'll just call that mouse, and I'll hit Save. So the first thing I'm going to build is my curves for the side view. And I'll just click on the right tab here, and I can start working. I don't often like to have the grid in the background, so an easy way to switch that off is just to press the F7 key, and that'll clean that right up. So the part of the body that I'm going to build first is going to be this upper surface. So you'll notice this design line cutting right through here. And above this line, the object has a draft in the vertical direction, and below this line, the mouse has a draft or a pull that will go in this up to down direction. And they're not on the same plane from this end down to this end. So I can't draw a nice straight line through here and build a surface off of this curve. So for the upper surface, what I'll actually do is overbuild the surface so that it extends beyond where I want it to go, and I'll cut that overbuilt surface with a line that matches this curve here. So let's go ahead and start drawing this upper line. So I'll select my control point curve line. So I'll just click out here to start building. As you can see, as I move my cursor over it, it immediately jumps to center. Center is a very kind of powerful snap, and it'll overpower a lot of things. So for now, I'm just going to switch my center object snap off. And I'm just kind of roughly framing in the shape here. I'll switch the control points on, I'll hit F10, and then I'll come back in and I'm going to edit these points by hand. And I'll just kind of drag those around till they're about where I want them to be. And now's the time you can really kind of play with your design. If there was something you weren't happy with in your sketch, you can go ahead and modify that in your drawings or in your 3D data. So that comes up kind of nice. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. Clean this up just a little bit. Bring that down here. Sometimes you might find that you've got some control points in here that you don't really need. You can go ahead and hit delete to get rid of those. Then just re-edit your points. Typically, the less points you have, the nicer or smoother surface you're going to end up with. And I'll hit escape twice to clean that up. So we have that curve there. So it's a little hard to see that curve, so we're going to make a couple of changes here. The first is we'll select this curve and we'll move that over to layer 3 and deselect it. And that makes that a little bit brighter. We'll change the name of that layer to curves. So the curve is represented in Rhino by this very thin line. We can adjust that line actually. If I go up to File and click on Properties, I'm taken to the Document Properties window. From here I can go into Appearance, and under Advanced Settings for Wireframe, which is the view style we're using in our main viewport, I'll open this tab, and under Objects I'll click on Curves, and here I have an object for curve width, which is also the curve thickness, and right now the default is set to 1. Let me just go ahead and make that a 2, and you can see that immediately pumps up over here. Make that a 4. It starts to get really thick. So 2 is probably a good number for us. It's not too thick that it gets in the way of itself, and it's nice and thin and manageable. Let me just go ahead and click OK on that. So now any curves I draw will have this same kind of thickness as long as I'm in this wireframe mode. As soon as I go to shaded mode, you'll see the lines thin out again. We can change that setting for shaded or for any of the other modes as well. For right now, we'll just leave it set for wireframe. Now I'm going to draw my end curves. So again, I'll choose the control point curve. Minimize that window a little bit, give us some more room. And again, I'm going to overdraw that curve. And I'll do the same thing here. I'm just going to overdraw these curves and we'll come back and do some editing. I'll hit F10 to switch on the control points. Now I'm not going to bother to try and get that to line up down here. As you can see, I have this little radius drawn in here, and we're going to handle that with an actual fillet edge. So I'm just going to build this coming down as if it actually just had a nice square corner to it. Just pull that out just a little bit. And it looks like that might need to go up just a little here. Just give me the intersection I want. If I want everything I draw from now on to end up on the curve layer, I simply click here to make that the current layer. And I'll take these and move them over to curves just so that they're on the corresponding layer for me. And now anything that I draw here will end up on the curve layer. So let's go ahead and draw this arc coming through here. F10 to turn on the control points, and just a little bit of point editing looks like it's needed for this one. Just bring that down a hair. Bring that forward slightly. And bring that one back slightly. So that's looking pretty good. Now I have another detail curve up here, and I'm going to use this curve as my basis to get me there. So I'll just drag this up, and while I'm dragging, I'll tap the Alt command, and you'll see the plus sign show up above my cursor. That tells me I'm going to make a duplicate. Release my mouse button to apply the command and to copy it. Switch on F10 for control points. And let me just drag these points up. So it doesn't take a whole lot of manipulating to get that curve to line up where I want it to. Since this second curve was really kind of a variation of this curve, that's why it made sense to actually copy and use the same curve with the same number of control points. Just kind of helps your continuity, keeps everything much smoother as you're moving along. I'll hit escape twice to switch these control points off. And let's move to the top viewport.